Hello, my name is Neil Myers. I'm a hypnosis practitioner and welcome to Hypnosis Helps. This is the first edition of a new show, and the goal of Hypnosis Helps is to explain what hypnosis is, what it isn't, to talk about some of the values, some of the uses of hypnosis across a whole range of different topic areas, to dispel some of the common myths about hypnosis, to help anybody who's watching this to understand how hypnosis may be able to help in their lives, and also to show what the limitations are and where it's not an appropriate tool. So in this particular show we're going to talk specifically about hypnosis in relation to memory enhancement, study enhancement and exam performance. Now, all of us sitting around this table and anybody watching has probably, I'm sure, had to study many things from the time they were small, and probably had to suffer the anxiety of examination at school. But it's not just at school. Many of us have to sit professional exams. Many of us have to learn things for work or for conferences or meetings that we have to attend. And so we're going to talk about hypnosis in relation to those skills. And I have with me Bill Miller, who's a colleague and a hypnosis practitioner, also practicing here in Connecticut, and Kevin, who we only met recently but has come to us specifically to enhance his capacity to learn and recall particular pieces of information which are important for his work. And so we're going to talk. That's the subject for today. So Bill, you could actually, perhaps we should start off with an example, because you had a very specific use of hypnosis for learning recently.
Yeah, it's you mean the one about the soap or the trailer?
The trailer.
The trailer.
Yeah.
So I've been backing. I have a small boat, 18 foot. And I've been backing this trailer and this boat into my home for 20 years or more, and it was always a problem. I would try to bring it in, and it would go, I would try 3, 4, 5, 6 times to bring this thing in, and it was so frustrating, and I never could do it. So I thought one day I could use hypnosis for this. So what I did is I brought myself into a hypnotic state, which you can be, as you know, Neil. You can do an eyes open hypnotic state. And I backed the boat in, and I didn't even think about it. I just let my subconscious watch what was going on. And when it didn't work, I just pulled it back up again, and I'd try again and again. And basically what I was doing is recording what the picture looked like when it worked and what it looked like when it didn't work. Didn't even think at all about what I was doing. So I did it about 100 times, and then after that, I could easily back it in the very first time.
And when you said you did it 100 times in a hypnotic state?
In a hypnotic state. So I just pulled it forward, backed it up. If it worked, great. Pulled it forward again, backed it up. If it didn't work, just kept doing that over and over and over again. And that allowed my subconscious to record, when it works, what the angles are. And this is without me thinking about it at all.
Yeah, now this is
that's the beauty.
So there's so many important things that Bill has just said there. There's a whole wealth of things. So one of the things is that let's talk about. Bill mentioned the subconscious, because in the hypnotic model we talk about the conscious and the subconscious mind. Now we're going to talk about that a lot in this series, because hypnosis deals primarily with the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind govern the autonomic functions of the body, the brain. It's a seat and storehouse of long-term memory. And the conscious mind is the thing that we commonly think of as our mind. It's the thing that said, well, we have to get here to film this today, and what are we going to talk about? And it's the thing where, in this instance, the example Bill gave of deciding that he was going to park the vehicle and how he was going to do it. Now, the interesting thing about the subconscious mind is that you said you did that 100 times, but you're doing it in your mind.
Yeah, I'm doing it, watching it with my subconscious only.
Right.
Kind of setting aside the conscious mind and letting the subconscious take care of it.
So just to clarify, are you physically doing this with the
Physically doing it.
Physically doing it.
So
Okay.
I physically did it, 100 times in a row while in an open-eyed hypnotic state.
Right.
And just didn't worry if it worked or didn't, because it was recording every time what it looked like when it was working and what it looked like when it wasn't working.
Right.
So that by the time I did it the next time, it knew, my subconscious knew, this is exactly what you need to do.
Right.
So the interesting thing was my brother-in-law came fishing with me, and I pulled the boat up out on the road outside my house, and he got quiet because he knows how difficult it is to back into this space because it twists and it turns. And without telling him, I dropped myself into an eyes open hypnotic state and just let my mind go quiet and let my subconscious back this thing in. It went down, twisted, turned, and right in on the first time. And he looked at me and said, "Oh, I couldn't do that." And the funny thing is, then I told him, well, I just did it in a hypnotic state. He said, "I knew there was something going on. And I figured, just be quiet and let you do it."
Right.
But really, I'm doing it in a hypnotic state. I'm recalling all that visual information that I learned through those 100 attempts.
Right.
So really is amazing.
Yeah.
And when I used to do it consciously, I'd back it in, it wasn't exactly right, and then I get frustrated. And I back it in, and it's not right, and I get frustrated. Well, that actually makes it worse.
Right. Right.
And so by getting the conscious mind out of the way and just letting my subconscious do it, it just went smoothly and easily.
Right, right, and this is perfect examples. Now, again, there's so much in here. So one of the things is that let's talk about some of the ways that people misunderstand hypnosis and how to use it. So one of them is the thought that, well, first of all, you can, when you're in a hypnotic state, it's always looking something like this. You're just out like that,
right.
and that's that you can be in a hypnotic state like that, but you can be, as you described it, completely eyes open. And in fact, some of the most of the hypnotic states that we experience on a daily basis are with our eyes open, because hypnosis is the bypass of the critical faculty of the conscious mind. It's not about being eyes open or eyes closed, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. So that's one sort of myth about hypnosis that's dispelled, that it always has to be with your eyes closed or you have to be in a certain trance state. It's not like that at all. What Bill was describing is the alignment of two parts of his mind, the conscious and the subconscious. Now, another myth which comes out is that your mind has to be, and Bill used this term, but I just want to clarify, the mind has to be blank. In other words, if I'm in hypnosis, the mind is just, there's nothing there. It's not really like that. There's still the intent, because he had the intention, he had a decision, and the intention was, I want to back this in, I want to park this is what I'm doing. And once that intention is given, that's given directly in this instance to the subconscious mind, and then it makes available the things that you'd previously rehearsed. Mm-hmm. And this is another myth that people have in relation to learning. Hypnosis in itself does not enable you to recall something that you've never learnt.
Right.
Right. So if I don't play the piano, so if I go into a hypnotic state and somebody says, well, and now imagine that you're playing the piano, I'll probably go along like this and make piano look, but I won't be able to play the piano. I won't magically be able to play. However, if you take a top concert pianist and you bring them into a hypnotic state and then say that they're going to play a piece that they've learned, rehearsed and are familiar with, in that state of hypnosis, then what it's going to do is it's going to enhance their ability to perform that in the best way possible. Why? Because their awareness is enhanced, which is one of the things that you're describing. And so they will be able not only to recall the piece to their mind, but they will have a much keener sense of the intonation, the volume of sound, the ambience of the room that they're playing with. If there's an audience in there, the reaction of the audience. So we're talking about hypnosis heightening awareness and heightening the capacity for the two parts of the mind to work together in the hypnotic model, the conscious and the subconscious. And so one of those myths that your mind needs to just be blank, that's not true. And but what one will experience is a kind of a quietness of mind, because what the subconscious mind in conjunction with the conscious mind is doing is bringing you that information you need to get the job done. what it's not bringing you is extraneous unhelpful thoughts like, oh, do it like this, don't do it like that way, dummy, do it this way, all this sort of chatter and criticism that we have. And people have long attempted to silence that. It's sometimes called the monkey mind and things like that. However, we're going to talk about why I believe some of that is present in the mind and why just trying to silence it on its own doesn't necessarily help. Mm-hmm. What Bill was describing was a condition where it's naturally like that. But he's also describing how in a hypnotic state you rehearse that 100 times. And that's the other part of it. Part of enhancing learning capacity using hypnosis is the ability to bring oneself into a hypnotic state so that the mind in that moment is optimally aware for the learning process. So it enhances learning and it enhances recall, if properly used. And here again, Bill's also describing that I wasn't present. No other hypnosis practitioner was, except for Bill himself, who was a hypnosis practitioner. So we're talking about self-hypnosis. We're talking about something that once learned, anybody can do. And one's capacity to do it, and it becomes greater and greater the more one practices.
Yeah, and I think a couple of things you said really resonated is the fact that when I was practicing it, my mind wasn't blank.
Right.
It was quieter at that moment. And what it was missing is exactly what you said, all these criticisms. Oh, it's too far over that way, it's too far this way, the angle's wrong. Because all those conscious thoughts are really what was fouling up my process of getting it back in. So I allowed those thoughts just to pass away and let the subconscious just record all the data about what it looks like when it's right and so forth. So you're right, it's not blank, but yet it was quieter in that case.
Right. Yeah. And so what we're doing here is we're doing an interesting experiment, because it's not an experiment in hypnosis, and we're not going to dismantle anybody or take them apart here on the show. But what I mean by an experiment is a trial of how this process works practically. Because one of the things I'm very keen to explain and to emphasize is that hypnosis is a real thing, it's not a fiction, and as it's a real thing, it's a measurable thing, and it's something where the results can be measured. One can see a difference, and I always encourage my clients to measure the differences. That's how we know it's effective and how it's working. And so what we're going to be doing is Kevin's going to talk about why he's here and what his goals are, and I'm going to describe how we're going to work with Kevin and how we're going to measure some of these results. So Kevin and I met just a few days ago. He just dropped into our office when Bill and I actually had just been working with another client. And so Kevin, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to be with us, and thank you for sharing what your goals and objectives are. And so the first thing we always ask is a potential client is, why are you here? What are your goals and objectives? So what are you?
No, it's my pleasure to be here. So I'm in the military. I'm relatively new to it, and because of that, there's a lot of things I need to know that I don't know, and I need to learn it quickly. So I've been interested in the subject of hypnosis for a while, and I've tried looking into self-hypnosis before, but due to my lack of experience, I don't think I've become good enough by my own estimation to really start applying it the way I would like to. So it was sort of serendipitous that it ended up at your all's door, but looking forward to learning along with you all.
Very good. Okay, so let's. So the first thing, well, there's two things that Kevin said that are very important. One was about self-hypnosis, and you'll hear me and we talk about self-hypnosis. Now, there are many forms of self-hypnosis, and some of you watching this may have looked at books and articles, and there's some similarity but a great deal of difference in certain techniques. There's a particular form of self-hypnosis that I teach, which I personally believe, and it's not my technique, it was taught to me, but I believe this method, the method I teach of entering self-hypnosis to my clients, is the most powerful and also the simplest, actually. And it's the entering of hypnosis by called post-hypnotic anchor, which again is a technical term which we'll talk more about. But it only has one downside to it, which is that for it to be the most effective, it has to be installed in a hypnotic state by a hypnosis practitioner. So the first time you need somebody like me, but after that you don't. And so part of the ways that we're going to work together is I'm going to show Kevin how to do that. So that's about self-hypnosis, but now Kevin's got a goal, and so you have to remember certain things. And is this in the form of an exam or a test, or what form does the recall have to take?
It's a combination of things. So part of it is written examination, a big part of it is verbal examination, and then there are practical skills which we'll need to learn as well. So it's learning in all kinds of ways for all sorts of reasons.
So it sounds like some of it is what we term book learning, and
right.
Some of it is like the spatial type of learning, the physical learning of tasks. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that was one of my questions. Is really, has hypnosis been used in the past to learn, and then secondly, are there specific areas? I was using it to learn a spatial orientation. And a spatial task, you would like to use it for that, plus book learning. So Neil, that's what I'd ask is, what is the history of using it for these types of things?
Well, I mean, it's because it's such a wide and deep thing, it's been used both for spatial learning, for book learning, for the recollection and recall of lecture material when somebody's speaking to you, and so for everything in between. So in any of those scenarios, what we're looking for is initially, I believe, a receptivity to the new experience. And so all learning is a new experience, right? It's something that either we have never done before, or we might have done something like it, or it's akin to it, but we have to open ourselves up. Now, whenever we're learning something new, there's a few tendencies of mind. One is naturally to try and link it with everything else we've learned, and to some degree, we all have to do that. However, that can sometimes get in the way. I don't know if you've ever tried to teach somebody something new, and sometimes if they're nervous, or sometimes if they're prideful, then they'll always try and say, oh yeah, that's just like this thing, or it's just like that. And sometimes you want to say to them, if you could only forget about that thing temporarily, because that's that and this is this, let's focus on this. So sometimes one is looking for the conscious and subconscious mind to bring experiences which are relevant, sometimes to keep out things which are getting in the way of learning the new experience. Now, what form does the conscious mind often take when this happens? It often takes the form of criticism.
Right.
Don't do it like this,
right.
Do it like that, and I want to talk about where that comes from in a minute. But in direct answer to your question, it's been known for all forms of learning, because any learning experience, even so-called book learning, there's almost like a communication that goes on even between book and a material, certainly in a lecture, and definitely in something where there's a physical element to it, learning a physical skill, as you were describing, right. And as you have to, it all has to come together. So the idea is constantly this idea of bringing one to a state where all of that happens. And again, I really want to emphasise, we're adults here of different ages, but we're not, people think of learning and exams, they tend to think of middle school, high school, maybe college, and of course it's very useful for those young people, but we're all in situations these days, technology changes, jobs change, where we're constantly having to learn things. And so the capacity to enhance that is very valuable. So what I'd like to...
So one question that just came up to me is, like myself, I'm a very visual learner, okay? So even when I'm studying, a book, a lot of times when I go to recall the information, I see the picture of the page in my mind and what it looked like.
Yeah.
Is it useful for people, and that's my way of learning, it's
right.
a visual. Some people are more auditory.
Right.
Is it useful? Can hypnosis be used for all different kinds of learners?
Yes, and that's a great point that you mentioned. I remember my first wife was very kinesthetic, and I'm quite auditory, and watching us move the table was almost comic, because it would go like this. We had to maybe move this table, and I would say, well, where do you want it to go? And she would say, well, just pick it up and just follow me. And I would say, yeah, but I need to know where we're going before I commit. Right. Because for her, just the touch of the table and follow me this way was enough. And for me, I needed to know somebody had to tell me where this was going to go, right? And so now, the truth of the matter is that we all have kinesthetic, auditory,
Right.
and visual learning mechanisms.
Yeah.
Some people favour the others. Some people favour an order
Right.
of them, and this has been known about for some period of time. I'm not a huge fan of something called neuro-linguistic programming, but NLP tries to plot how people learn something. In other words, for me, do you need to tell me where it is, then have me visualise it, and then do it physically? With my first wife, it was pick it up, get a picture of where it's going to go, then you'd explain it to her. So she has a different process. But
Right.
the point of the matter is that we want to be using all of our capacity all the time, right? Because the more it's like the instruments of a symphony orchestra. You know, the more you bring together, the better it sounds and the better it performs.
Yeah.
You don't just want one. You just don't want to hear the violins or just the brass. You want them all to play together, and then you produce lovely music. And it's the same. So, hypnosis' unique capacity is the ability to coordinate synergistically all of our functions and capacities. And so, as you were describing it, that's what you were doing. And even though you didn't mention it, I'm guessing that there were sounds there.
Yeah.
I noticed that when I learnt to shave with a double-edged safety razor, which is not a lot of people do that anymore, the sound was very important. I remember when I was first learning, if there was a fan in the room and I couldn't hear, I'd cut myself, right? Because I couldn't hear. Now you'd think that was entirely either visual or kinesthetic, but there was a big sound element to it as well, for me. So in a hypnotic state, one's awareness is enhanced and all of that's enhanced.
Yeah, that's the thing that I think I found over the last couple of years of doing hypnosis is it's very different from what you think, and that is one area that's key is you think you might be less aware and be in a trance and be away someplace, but actually you're in a more aware state where things actually come in easier and you'll notice things that
there's been you notice things that you hadn't previously noticed, and it's interesting, over the last few years, there's been a great deal of talk about a state that's sometimes described as flow. I don't mean the person on the Progressive Insurance, I mean I mean this way where everything seems to just kind of happen easily and comfortably. And many top performers in sport, in music, surgeons, when they're doing their work, and all of us, at different times have experienced states of flow. However, it very often has appeared as a mystery as to how we get there. It almost seems to be serendipity, accident. Sometimes we're there, sometimes we're not. And the frustration is sometimes we get there, sometimes we can't. And people develop routines, even superstitions. If you watch some baseball players, you know, they'll take off a glove, put on a glove, step out of the box, step into the box, you know, put their hands on the bat, tap the ground a couple of, whatever. They've all got their own routines. And what they're attempting to do, I believe, is to bring them into the optimal state of performance. And a lot of sports psychologists have picked up on some of these things and tried to give people very set routines. And routine is one way of entering a hypnotic state. However, if you know how to enter the hypnotic state, you can be in that optimal state instantly.
Right.
You don't have to go through a whole palaver of routines, and you know, it might not be practical.
And one of the things that that you're mentioning, you know, we're talking about learning here, but it actually covers across a lot of areas. And one you mentioned is could you use it to improve your golf swing?
Oh, definitely.
Could you learn? And that's the thing. The hypnosis, once learned, can be used for so many different activities, and for learning so many different things and optimizing so many different things.
Yeah.
I only thought of it for my trailer and boat because I was so frustrated. And I said, let me give this a shot and see how it works. But really, it's the same principles applied across football players, baseball players, or anything like that.
Right. And so right now, I have a young lady who came to me. She's 14 years old, and she came because she was having difficulty sleeping. But hopefully I don't know whether I'll get her on this show because she's a bit nervous about coming on. But the wonderful thing about this person is that she's a very, very good swimmer. She's, I think, in her age group, in the top 3 in the mile in the state. So she's very good. And now she's sleeping comfortably and easily. So she's achieved that using the self-hypnotic techniques. And I'm very keen to show her how to enhance her athletic performance if she wants to learn.
Right.
By using hypnosis. But she'd never thought about that. Nobody's ever introduced that to her. And I know that many top sports people enhance their performance through the use of hypnosis. People aren't aware of it because because the notion is that hypnosis must be like this, right?
Right.
But they're entering that state of increased awareness. And by the way, true hypnosis, just to make it clear, goes beyond the creative visualization of some of the sports psychology that's out there. It's beyond that. That's helpful, but we're talking about far, far deeper states. It's not just a question of rehearsing it in your mind, although that has value. It's beyond that. So it's the capacity to enter that state to make it available. So,
and you know, you talk about that is, and the question comes up is, you know, is a hypnosis, does it allow you to learn more quickly and efficiently, or is it better recall later, or is it all of those things?
It's both. I believe it's my belief that if we could take all students and show them how to enter hypnotic states, how to bring themselves into a hypnotic state in class, they would be more attentive, more aware, a lot more content and happier. They would learn much more quickly. Probably the teachers would like it because it would certainly shorten the working day. Right. But then when it comes to the capacity to recall, then that can be enhanced as well in an appropriate way, because the subconscious mind, on my view, is an enormous organic computer that literally has the capacity to store every single thing that we've ever come across in our whole lives. And the belief is out there in many quarters, and that we never truly forget anything. It's just a question of whether we can recall it. Now, of course, we don't want to be recalling everything all the time because that would drive us crazy. But what we do want to have is the ability to retrieve. And the more we can bring ourselves into hypnotic states, the more easily we can learn, the more easily we can recall, and the more comfortable and happy those states become. And they become stress-free states. Right.
So when we were talking about this, and we're specifically talking about Kevin and this kind of a process, what we're saying is that he's going to induce a hypnotic state when he's taking the test. Yep. Is that correct?
And also when he's learning the material.
Right.
Right.
So both when he learns it and when he actually takes the test.
And nobody's going to know.
That's what I was going to ask.
He's going to be able to. Nobody will actually see any change.
Right.
Because he'll be able to enter that state literally like that.
Right.
And actually, as we do it, the way we do the hypnosis, take for example the learning, as the learning scenario moves through time, a lecture, reading a book, whatever it might be, his concentration and absorption capacity for that material will increase. That's how it works, not decrease. Now, of course, you know, we don't want him doing it for 24 hours, but if he could, you know, but during, let's say, a 20-minute or 30-minute period or 40 he's going to become more and more focused and more calm as he does so. And similarly with the exams, it's going to be easier and easier. And that's the exact opposite of what a lot of people experience.
And I think something you said here is really important, is that it becomes easier, and you're not going to have like the emotional frustrations and things like that. That's something, because that directly would inhibit your learning. Absolutely. And your recall.
And I'd now like to talk about, you know, where some of that stuff comes from, because I noticed this in myself, and we've all done. I've played lots of different sports and various things, and I've actually taught people lots of different skills, mostly to adults. And I think most people who've learned anything from me, and you've learned something from me, would say, you know, I'm quite a kindly teacher. I'm not one of these mean teachers that puts people down. And I did that to every single person who I ever taught anything, with one exception, myself. I was horrible to myself, awful. And I would notice, you know, when I played tennis, I hit a tennis ball badly, and I could hear my internal voice, "What's wrong with you, idiot? You know, you should," and all that angry noises. And this puzzled me for many years.